Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Simon Hodgkins, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ulrich Henes. Ulrich is one of the most recognized names when it comes to the world of international business and localization. He's always been fascinated by language, cultural differences, and global business. And back in 1996, Ulrich founded the Localization Institute, which is a leader in localization education to this day. The Institute also organizes the leading event in the localization industry, which is LocWorld. Many people listening will be very familiar with LocWorld. It's where people network, people get together, and they ultimately learn from each other. And last but not least, Ulrich, of course, has won a number of awards throughout his illustrious career, and also picked up a Think Global Award as Language Industry Person of the Year. So it's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have Ulrich with us today. So thank you for joining us, Ulrich.
Hey, thanks, Simon. Good to be here.
Let's move on. Let me get on to the show. I've got a lot I want to ask you. So as I mentioned, you're well known in the localization industry, of course, and I understand that you spent the first decade of your career, though, organizing international campaigns. And they were sort of the arms race, apartheid, and promoting global social justice. So my first question to you, if I can, is how did all that come about? And then what prompted the move and the sort of transition into the localization world that we know and love today?
Well, how many hours do we have, Simon? No, thank you for asking. Being at the point of my life, that I'm right now, having turned 70 earlier this year, gives me, I just naturally, go over my life, and I'm really glad that I started out the way I did. So I've always been, my first love always has been business. I went to a business high school in southern Germany. I did a management program with a local manufacturing company that already back in the early 70s had manufacturing facilities in 15 European countries. And I was I learned a lot there. Then I had to do my military service, but I opted to do an alternative service. I became what's known as a conscientious objector. I did not want to serve in the German military. And as luck had it, that took me to the United States, where I ended up working for about 1.5 years with a social justice movement that is known under by its leader, Cesar Chavez. He was a leader of migrant farm workers, a lot of them, what is now Mexican farm workers who are not covered by a lot of the labor laws. And the way they got, my role was that of a boycott organizer. So I was based in Philadelphia organizing a consumer boycott that ultimately was aimed to improve the working conditions of migrant farm workers. By the time I was done with that service and heading back to Germany, the choice was, do I go back into business where I had come from, or do I want to stick with this social justice, international peace work? I felt at the time my skills, I hope I wasn't too impressed with myself, but my good organizational skills, my understanding of running a business, I wanted to put at the service of the peace movement, so to speak. And so I ended up working for the next 8 years full-time for an international peace organization that organizes campaigns based on nonviolence in the Gandhian Martin Luther King spirit. And preparing for this talk, I just remembered we already localized. Like then I did a campaign against apartheid, and apartheid was under a lot of pressure at that point, and a lot of people were imprisoned either for violating apartheid laws or for protesting. And so I organized a campaign to draw attention to all the people imprisoned in apartheid. And we printed up little old-fashioned key tag labels on paper, and it had a Bible quote on one side in English a quote from, I forget, somewhere in the Bible saying, could this key unlock a prison door? And we put it in English on one side, and then we found the Afrikaans equivalent of that Bible quote and printed that on the other side. And the campaign encouraged people to take any old key, tied to that label, and send it to a nearby South African embassy or consulate. So localization back even in the days before I even knew that was a thing. So.
Great. Well, I was going to ask you like how it sort of that sort of transition begun, but even back then, it was very much prevalent. So, can you take us back to the initial concept then, just to move the story on to the next stage, which I know everybody sort of knows you for, but the initial concept for the Localization Institute, and of course, Localization World, this large industry leading event, with of course Donna Parrish and a host of people along the way. What were the changes and the developments that you've seen over the years, and what was that initial concept, the spark, where those two sort of entities came into being? And the reason I'm asking you, Ulrich, is because a lot of people are familiar with it today, but over the course, since their inception, many people have joined the localization industry. It's a bigger industry today than it was back then when it all started. So it'd be very nice to hear those sort of initial concept stages, and also the developments that you've seen from your perspective over the years.
Wow, that's a lot of things you're asking here, Simon. Help me stay on track. Well, real briefly, the Localization Institute came out of my experience as an international sales and marketing manager. So when I left the social change peace movement work, I moved to the US, got a job with a local software company, sold their software globally, and got to a point where we needed to localize. And since I was German, since I am German, it made sense that I would also manage the German localization of our leading product. That got me, gave me firsthand knowledge about localization. And after I left that company, I had, learned that their localization was becoming more and more important for global success for software companies. There was very little information about it out there, and then led me to found the Localization Institute in '96. I launched small events, a roundtable in '97, early '97, for localization managers, and more seminars, more roundtables, more seminars. And then at that time, there was already a global localization event called LISA, the Localization Industry Standards Association. But a lot of the people who came to my small events told me that they really disliked going to these LISA events. They were not to their liking, and they really liked what I was doing. And couldn't I please consider doing a very large event where everyone would get together, they could do their business, people from Microsoft and from back then Sun Microsystems, and so on. So I realized that was too much for me, my small institute. I went to Donna Parrish, who was the editor, owner of Multilingual Magazine, and we launched LocWorld in 2003. It was right out of the gate a much bigger success than we thought. And people right away said, you got to do this in Europe. And then eventually, why didn't you ever do anything in Asia? And so, looking back almost 20 years, we've done 45 LocWorlds all over Asia, all over Europe, all over North America. And it's been a much bigger success than we anticipated. Now you asked about changing of the industry.
Really? Going on from how these two sort of entities came about, which is fascinating. It's really about your viewpoint. You've had a real sort of macro overview, if I can use that term, of the localization industry. Because on one hand, you've got the educational side of things through the Institute.
Right.
On the other hand, you've created this global event, as you say, in different parts of the world. Everybody seems to love it. Everybody goes to it. I know we, VistaTech have attended. It's almost like a community event where we meet up with old friends and colleagues and industry, whether they're competitors, they're still friends, and everybody's sort of together in this localization industry. And of course, there's customers and prospects and business partners there. So it really has become this sort of phenomenon in the events world for the localization space. But my question is back to, from your perspective, from where you've been looking over this landscape since back in 96, 97, really, from those early small events and those people sort of almost encouraging you, I think, to say, why don't you do this bigger? And then can you do it in Europe? And all those questions came about. How have you seen the landscape ebb and flow? How has it changed? What have you seen during your tenure?
Well, thanks, Simon. I mean, what I've seen, I really like. The early days were, really comparing learning by trial and error. These early roundtables were people from, these companies who were just learning how to do this and better, faster, cheaper, on a bigger scale, more languages, getting into Asian languages. Those were really tough challenges. I love, there were hardly any tools out there. Trados was, one of the very early tools. And now when I look around, it's amazing, what has come about. Specialization, the tools, machine translation, translation management systems. And I think for many companies now, it's a foregone conclusion that in order to succeed, they need to be global, right? That used to be a big argument in the early days. Going global was kind of like, well, what are the pros and cons of that? Okay, let's look at this before we jump onto that bandwagon. Let's really, we really need to look thoroughly at this if this makes sense. No, we're way beyond that. Going global is a must. And for almost any company, the potential of the global market far exceeds, whatever domestic market they're starting out in. So I'm really glad that localization, both on the product side and increasingly on the marketing side, where you've been really active, is becoming just as an accepted thing. And it makes sense to get educated in it. It makes sense to read about it, to go to meetings, go to conferences, to get better at it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Ulrich. So the event. Thank you for the views there on your perception of how it's changed. I wanted to ask you just another couple of quick things about Localization World, if I can. Yeah. And one of them is about, it's on everybody's calendar. Okay, it's an event that everybody knows is coming up. I suppose during the pandemic, a lot of it has been virtual, which has kind of maybe enabled some people to visit other localization worlds that maybe wouldn't have been on their physical sort of travel calendar, which is there's good and bad in that. So I wanted to ask you if you could pinpoint, or when you think about the success of Localization World, what would you say is the reason for its long-term success? Because it seems to grow from strength to strength.
Thank you, Simon. I mean, I've seen some fluctuations. I wouldn't, probably like any other business, it doesn't, it's not a straight arrow up. But yes, overall, from its early beginnings, it's grown, from one event with 300 people or 280 people in Seattle to an event that takes place 3 times a year, before COVID, with attendance of 600-700 people in Europe and North America, and about 300 in Asia. I'd like to think what its key factors for its success is we're very professional in organizing events. The event, the user experience, and this starts with the hotel, the city, the food, the social events, is always very good. We do not do this cheap. The other thing is, I think Donna and I are not ego driven. I have a wonderful partner in Donna Parrish. We are not ego driven. So LocWorld is not about Ulrich and Donna. It's about bringing people together and letting them do their business. And our job is to create the best possible environment for that to make happen. That is what we are, what it's about. I don't have a favorite machine translation system. I don't have a preferred tool that I'm trying to convince you to follow my lead. It's all about me creating, not unlike maybe someone who runs a restaurant. It's not about me, it's about letting people get together and eating a meal together and leaving having had a good experience. And the other point, even though it's a business, right? This has been a business from the beginning. We do it in a very community-minded, and you mentioned that earlier, you used the term, it is kind of a community, and we are very open. Someone once said, the thing I like about LocWorld, you don't have to be somebody to be somebody. I can come at wherever I am and I'm welcome. And just to use one example, for 10 years, Teresa Marshall, who is the VP of Globalization at Salesforce, one of the biggest software companies globally, has been running an unconference as part of LocWorld. So anyone who comes to LocWorld can sit down, face to face in Berlin next year or virtually and be in a room with Teresa Marshall and basically talk about localization, right? And I think that spirit, that it is not elitist, we are not catering to any elite. We bring people together who, wherever they are. And one more thing, if you have the time, it's been always important, both for the Institute and LocWorld, to draw really a firm line between the commercial aspect of the event and the content. So we are like a little bit like an old-fashioned, like a newspaper. You have articles, and they're written by journalists or maybe opinion pieces, but they are not affected by the advertiser. So if there's a story about the new Ford SUV or the new VW SUV on the front page, test, that has not been influenced by the fact that there is an ad by Volkswagen on the back page, right? They did not get this favorable article in the front page by buying an ad. The program is made simply by an independent advisory board under our leadership. And then there is exhibits, there are sponsors, but they do not buy content. And I think that is still it has meant that we have turned away good money. I remember 3-4 years ago, someone was willing to take our platinum sponsorship for about $30,000, but only if the CEO could give the keynote speech at LocWorld. That was the condition, and we simply said, no, that's not for sale. We pick a keynote speaker based on the content we want to present, not on the money you pay us. So thanks for asking.
No, thank you, Ulrich. They're three great insights into the success and the continued success of LocWorld. So thank you. I suppose my last question, because I said I had two quick questions, I just wanted to add in, and the last one is around the upcoming event next year, which is LocWorld Africa. I'm not sure if it's the first time it's been organized on the continent. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If it is, and also what was the thinking there, and what are your viewpoints on moving then LocWorld event to Africa, albeit in a virtual environment? I think this time around.
It is, yeah. Well, it takes me back to your fair city of Dublin, where when the last time we were with LocWorld at the Dublin Convention Center, beautiful facility. Yeah. Someone came up and said from, I think, Microsoft at the time, and I do not remember her name, and said, Ulrich, you really ought to do something, in Africa. This is really, a lot of companies are paying attention to that. And we started developing work back then. And we were actually at the point we did surveys. What should we cover? Where should we hold it? And where to hold it is a huge challenge in Africa. Travel is not cheap. And so by going to Nairobi, you eliminate a lot of people, who would not be able to fly from Mozambique to Nairobi, or even from Lagos, or from Addis Ababa, and so on. So, and then I got ill. I got this really rare illness that took me out for a year. And with it, the whole Africa project was shelved. But now, in a way, the upcoming LocWorld Africa, which will take place in early March next year, is possible through this gift of COVID. Joke. Where it gave us permission. First of all, we got to rehearse doing good virtual events, and we decided to do LocWorld Africa as a virtual event. It will allow people to join in from Cape Town, from Cape Town, or from Casablanca, from Abu Dhabi, from all these cities. And I'm currently working on putting the program together this afternoon. I have a 1-hour meeting about, and we're really, really excited. We're early days, but it's, it brings me back to my work from in my first decade of professional life, where what we have learned about localization, about marketing, about languages, curating languages, technology, and we can bring that and learn about Africa. So we want to make this a very integrated event with many people from Africa talking about what it means to do projects. I had a fascinating conversation yesterday with an agency in Johannesburg who will hopefully do a case study about a Colgate product that they recently launched in African countries. And in many African languages, including jingles. I mean, they're talking about localizing jingles, not just having one jingle for all countries, but having different musical elements to respond. So to me, to bring basically what we have developed all over the globe, including, we did one event in Buenos Aires, to Africa, and maybe jumpstart, bring, and for us on the outside of Africa, learn about the diversity and the opportunities of Africa, but also bring the tools that we have built and make them available to people in education of languages in Africa, but people who develop businesses, language businesses, is just very, very exciting. So
it is exciting, Ulrich, and just anecdotally, the people that I'm talking to throughout the industry, and anytime localization, LocWorld comes up, everybody in my sphere is talking about LocWorld Africa, because it's something between it's new and also fascinated to see how this thing goes. So we're really looking forward to it. So it's great to hear some of the background. I didn't realize some of the thinking went right back to that event in Dublin. That's interesting.
I still remember sitting on the upper floor of the convention center on a bench, having come out of the big thing, overlooking toward the Wicklow Mountains. That's and right. Talking about LocWorld Africa, why we really should be doing a LocWorld Africa.
Fascinating. So that's great to hear, and continued success. We're very much looking forward to LocWorld Africa. So just before we finish off on the events, because there are a few other things I want to ask you, but I can't miss out brand to global. And I know you mentioned Donna and her involvement, and Multilingual Magazine you sort of referenced, and I know that's gone through a change fairly recently. And the new team there, Nimsy and the team behind Multilingual Magazine, that's gone on to a new sort of iteration now. But I wanted to, sorry, go ahead, Ulrich, what did you say?
I said just a new home.
A new home, yes. I wanted to ask you about brand to global events, because that's something that kind of happened almost sort of during the downtime of LocWorld, but within its own, we've attended a number of them. And within its own right, that's a really interesting event. So maybe just for our audience, could you just share a little bit about Brand to Global for me?
Absolutely. So again, takes me back to my early years. I come from international sales and marketing, and localizing a product is not an end by itself. it's a beginning. Once you have the product localized, now you need to figure out how are you going to sell that in the target market, where are you going to advertise, and all of those kind of just the marketing, right? Which trade shows are you going to take it to? So I had been trying to get the global sales, the marketing, the global branding and marketing piece into LocWorld. But, when you look at companies, the localization is typically in one silo and the marketing is in another silo. And these people do not talk a lot to each other, don't sometimes not even know about each other. And so getting the marketing people to come to LocWorld did not work. And so in 2012, I decided to create an event just that, by its very name would signal this is about global marketing. And the event is called Brand to Global. We ran it 3 times in London, twice in Menlo Park. We were going to do it again in Berlin last year. But then COVID got in the way and we held it virtually. We've put it on hold just now because we're so busy with, having to change to virtual LocWorld and doing these seminars. But I've continued to find, I hope we will, as things get more normal, do we dare to hope next year, we can go back and offer more brand to global topics, because I think, that a big surprise, Simon, to me was that, having done localization stuff for 20 years and having it become accepted, how in a way much farther behind global sales and marketing is. And I give you one example. One of the early brand to globals, I ended up talking to someone at Audi in Germany. To talk about whether he could come and give a presentation at Audi. He explained to me, might have been, let's say, 2013, 14, that Audi had until recently not had anyone in global marketing. He had just moved from the French marketing group to headquarters in Germany to start coordinating global marketing. Until then, there was a German marketing, and then they would hand things over to the US, to Australia, wherever they market Audis, but there was no concerted effort at Audi. And to me, thinking that a globally successful brand like Audi did not even make an effort to coordinate these global activities, it's just kind of like, what? But it was reflected in my experience organizing brand to global that we're still much more in early days of global branding and marketing than I thought.
That's fascinating, Ulrich, and it kind of helps me with my next question that I want to put to you, and that's because we talked a little bit about your view of the landscape and the journey, and you're just sharing there the example of how even in today's world, some of this stuff, it's just not connected up. So my question really is around, when you think of all the localization developments that we've had, and then you think about a general vision about where you see this going, do you have any sort of things that you can sort of pinpoint as major developments that are going to be here with us in 3, 5, maybe 10 years time? If you look forward as opposed to looking through the history of what we know, do you see it changing still at a rapid pace?
Yes. Now, here I need to explain that I am not so much a visionary. So predicting what's going to happen is not something that just comes naturally to me. I will try, though, my best and say that based on looking back 25 years,
Yeah,
I see this area. I mean, I've gone through 3 crises. There was the first was the dot-com crash back in around, what was it, 1999, 2000, somewhere in there.
yeah, about
Then
2000, I think, yeah.
Then the big 2008, crash, and now COVID. What I've noticed that even though there was, a sudden, we got hit hard for a moment, the demand for what we are selling, what the localization industry is producing, continues to grow unabatedly. And I think that will continue for several more decades, would be my prediction. I think there will be more tools, there will be more, and the tools taking over what machines can do will free up will actually generate more business for humans for work that only humans can do. So, in that marketing, social media, sentiment analysis, more companies will offer products in more languages. So I think if a young person was asking me, saying, this localization industry, I have some interesting offers, but I'm wondering, is that going to be around for a while? I would, without hesitation, says yes. Maybe not forever, but for the next 20, 30 years for sure.
Yeah, it is interesting when you think of all the tools and technology and AI and how it, that shift in the human aspects, and humans maybe looking at higher quality tasks. It's quite an interesting development that we've seen in the last number of years, and it seems to be continuing at a pace. And you're right to point out, Ulrich, the big crises that we've been through over the last 20 odd plus years. The content side of things continues to grow, the messaging continues to grow, and the world continues to be more and more connected, doesn't it? So it's a great point that you make.
Which, Simon, is what takes me right back to those early years, where for me to improve communication amongst people, in German we have a word for this, as you can guess, it's Völkerverständigung, which is creating understanding between people. That's what still is the red thread that runs through it for me. It used to be directly about apartheid, ending a really bad situation, right? But underlying what I like doing is increasing the knowledge. I think the fact that Netflix, to use a concrete example, is now making shows all over the world, but then bringing shows from Germany, from France, from Korea, and dubbing them, and suddenly Americans are watching Korean shows or German shows. And the world has been watching American shows for many decades, right? But now we're bringing in these different cultures, and I believe, and I have no proof, but it's getting harder and harder if you've been participating in other countries' lives by watching a sitcom out of Denmark or Turkey or Kazakhstan. It's just going to be much harder for someone to come along and paint that country as an evil nation, right? Because you've kind of, in a way, have met people from there, right? And so it's not going to be quite as easy, for a Hitler or someone to just really, hijack the fear of foreigners, which is a natural fear we have of the unknown, right? And put it to evil use. Yeah, so now I'll get off my what is that? What a preacher gets onto. My soapbox. No, but it's important to me that what I do today, even though I've worked with big brands. Just yesterday we got registrations from 5 people from a major global company for one of our new events. So I take pride that I'm helping these big brands, to master cultural differences, linguistic differences. I feel it contributes to that global understanding. We all do. I think all of us, you at VistaTech have been doing that for years as well. So
we actually celebrate 25 years next year. So it's been an incredible journey for a lot of the team at VistaTech too. But to your point, I think we almost are becoming more and more vested in each other's culture. Which isn't a bad thing, because it leads to better understanding and a better world, hopefully, if we look at it optimistically. And I think your point about Netflix, it is incredible to think that, you know, say, for example, a non-English produced film or series, I should say, becomes a global phenomenon. And everybody's watching it in a different language, with or without subtitles, with or without dubbing, depending on their preference. And it is an incredible phenomenon to see. And I'm sure that, you know, there are many companies doing that now, but the streaming world and the content world, the video world, it's certainly giving people a rich table of culture to look in and out of. Yeah. So thank you, Ulrich.
Yeah.
And I suppose my final question then on this sort of topic that we're on here is, we've talked about your sort of the way you see it going and the advice you'd give to maybe somebody looking at getting into the localization industry. But what do you think as a collective industry? Are there any steps that you feel we should be taking collectively?
Yes, I couldn't have set you up better to ask that question, because one of my new endeavors of this year is working together with 3 other people, having launched this LocWorld initiative called Edu in Loc. And I think what we as an industry, to keep on staying on track, we need to improve education and localization. There are still too many people who see going to language school just as this is if you want to become a translator or an interpreter. And the schools need to change. It needs to even go further. Right now, we as an industry need to communicate to people who are currently in, let's say, what would be in America a high school, in Germany a gymnasium, you know, that learning languages will open you up to amazingly interesting jobs in the localization industry. And it's not, I mean, you're going to sit up in front of a computer with a book and you're going to be typing a translation all day long. That's, you know, appealing to introvert people. We need to appeal to people who are end up project managers or techno reviewers and all of that. And I think that's going to be, I'm really excited about having launched Edu in Loc. We're doing really, like right now, we're putting the final touches on a program that will connect industry leaders with schools. So if a particular, let's say Limerick, the University of Limerick would like to get someone from the industry to talk about localization at Salesforce, there's actually a directory where they can contact someone who has already agreed to do that. And then someone from Salesforce or from SAP or from Facebook will actually come and give a guest lecture about what is localization like at Facebook. And I'm really excited about doing this. And I hope the whole industry will join in promoting this effort of Edu in Loc. We eventually plan to make that its own entity under its own direction, but we're kind of currently, you know, launching that ship. And once it can set sail on its own, we'll be happy to get off board. So,
no, I think it's an excellent initiative, Ulrich, and I know from our own perspective, we have been for many years pre-pandemic. We haven't been doing it during the pandemic. We have been taking in students from various universities and language schools on a regular basis. They tour the headquarters, they get a presentation, and we sort of help them understand a little bit about international business. But I think, you know, as an LSP or a global content solution provider, that's one thing. But I think where you've got these sort of leaders in industry within these global brands, being able to have them in this resource, this rich directory where various universities around the world can pull these people in to help build the education process, I think that's a terrific initiative. So continued success with that. And I wanted to maybe, as we come towards the end of our time here, there's just a couple more things I'm going to squeeze in if I can, Ulrich. And
absolutely.
One of them is about, we've talked a little bit, we've touched on the pandemic, and, you know, of course, why wouldn't we? Everybody's talking about it still. And it's certainly accelerated business, hasn't it, in lots of cases. Some industries and some, you know, some people, of course, have suffered terribly. But it has also been a boost to lots of industries. And The content we touched on earlier has continued to grow throughout for lots of areas. Some businesses have done really, really well. You only have to look at the tech sector, for example, to see how fast that's grown over the last couple of years. But it seems to me, and this is the question I want to put to you, that the localization industry, particularly throughout the pandemic, and as we come hopefully out of the pandemic onto the years ahead, the localization industry has probably never been as important as it is right now. Would you agree with that statement, or would you have any views on that perspective?
No, I hadn't thought about that, but I agree with you. I think it is more important than ever has been, and I think we need to continue fight for the recognition of that within companies. But yes, I marvel at what has been created, and I think it's important for the world to continue to grow.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. So look, before we wrap up today, I do want to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to touch on or share with our audience today that maybe I haven't asked you, or that you want to maybe share before we wrap up today?
Well, let me just say that thank you for inviting me to be part of this podcast. I want to say it's been such a pleasure to become part of the local. I mean, I was, when I created the Localization Institute, I basically stepped full-time into localization, away from international sales and marketing. And it's been just such a pleasure to be part of this global community. I just, looking back now, all the people I've met, it somehow the localization industry attracts fascinating people, my kind of people, the people who love other cultures, who are delighted to meet someone from another country who speaks and who grew up differently. It's been amazing, and I look forward to continuing for a while to meet. But that has been one of the big pleasures of being an organizer of events and being and doing all of that. The people who are in our industry, just wonderful. And I'm going to, say thank you to all of you who have come to my events or coming to our events, for giving us a chance to organize them. And I hope you have gotten what you came for, and I hope you will continue finding what you're looking for. Thank you.
Well, Ulrich, all I can say is thank you to you for all the events that you've put on, the great sort of 25 plus years that this continues to grow and educate people around the world. It sounds like you've new initiatives which sound really exciting. And of course, we've all got LocWorld Africa to look forward to, and more LocWorld events throughout the world, which I know is already on our calendars. So we look forward to attending those, and continued success to you and to Donna and to everybody associated with everything that you do. We truly appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time out to spend some time with me today.
Well, thank you, Simon.
So that's the end of today's show with Ulrich Henes. Please make sure to tune in again to watch and or listen to another episode of VistaTalks, where we'll be joined by interesting people from all around the world. Thank you, Ulrich.
Thank you, Simon.